Shinobi Art of Vengeance is probably the most pleasant surprise from Sega to come out this year, aside from maybe Pirate Yakuza. I'm not really following much of a script per se when making this video, so bear with me a little bit if I sound like I'm rambling at some point, just kind of putting my thoughts together and putting it out there. By the same studio that managed to bring back Streets of Rage 4 and bring it into the modern limelight, I gotta say, Shinobi is doing just that in spades by the same studio, being shown they're just as capable of making a fully competent 2D platformer as they are a side-scroller beat-em-up, with a lot of the same DNA taken back and forth, which, personally, while I wasn't the biggest Shinobi fan myself, I did play it and was familiar with it, but they expanded the original idea of combat from the Genesis era games specifically, and made it just a bit more palpable that you aren't just individually running and slashing people in single hits. Rather, this game encourages you to have entire combos lined up and all sorts of different tools and arsenals to complete your journey in such a rhythmic way that it's satisfying regardless how you do it. You of course have your standard light and heavy attacks to hack and slash enemies and chop down their health, but to add to that, you have multiple different combo moves that you can earn throughout the game, as well as the normal kunai that were usually your one-hit kill guarantee from a distance as a projectile in the original game. But this time around, it's blended in nicely to where if you're comboing enemies and there's just that one guy out in the distance, it's very satisfying to just hit a button, throw out a kunai, knock them down. And in most cases I've found it tends to be a one-hit kill, but that's not always guaranteed. Not only this, on top of all those tools, you also have ninjutsus, as they call them in the game, are Nippon. And throughout the course of the game, you're constantly getting new ones that give you a bevy of different attacks. You have fire spitting that can damage who's ever right in front of you and chip away health for a while. You have a lightning strike in which you just go in a straight line and zap everybody, and after you've gone through, they continue to get hit numerical times in a row. There's a counter move, and so on and so forth. What I think is particularly nice with the combat is that if you manage to hit an enemy enough times in succession, you are able to do a certain move. I can't remember the name of it at this time, but you basically hit both your bumpers together, and anyone who has their little symbol above their head for you ready for this attack, you can go through and chain guys together and insta-kill them, earning you extra money, extra health, and kunai to go with it. Ultimately, it's such a blessing. I can't begin to stress that enough. No matter how many rooms the game throws you and just overwhelming you with enemies, there's something really satisfying about just taking what you have at your disposal and then just cutting guys down without necessarily one-shotting everybody, adding a nice sense of tug-of-war to the moment-to-moment action. As far as the exploration goes, I will say the game does give me a sense of Metroidvania DNA in the process, but I wouldn't say it's exact at all. Because it's not so much you're constantly running around the entire game world exploring new areas. However, it does add a sense of replayability as you go, because you'll be getting all sorts of different tools that up until you progress far enough you don't have access to. But getting them, all sorts of different pathways and passages that you see earlier that you can't access, now open up gradually throughout the game, giving you more reasons to go back and revisit levels and find all sorts of different collectibles and side objectives to go with it. From my experience playing the game, these kind of collectibles go from a range of things. You can find additional Nippon in order to give you new moves in combat. You can get a series of amulets that can give you both passive and active effects for all sorts of different things. There's one that I think comes exclusively with the deluxe edition of the game that for every 10 hits you gain in-game currency to encourage you to continue comboing enemies together to earn that much more money as you go. There's another that has the old classic Sega POW logo that you would see in the arcade Shinobi game, in which your attack is that much better, especially if your combo ranks up. But you have to also decide for yourself, okay, if that's the amulet I'm getting for my combo, I'm now killing enemies back and forth, but I'm no longer able to keep them alive long enough to do the insta-kill chain move to get more health back. So if you're struggling with managing your health from just exploration, even if you're doing great in combos, you'll find yourself wanting to switch to something else to keep things going on. You can of course also earn all sorts of different things like health upgrades, max kunai, slots, things of that nature. There's a secret unlockable sword you can get in the game by doing things that are called like the Anko Rifts or something to that effect, that are more or less challenge rooms that give you a arena from what I played that constantly dwindles as you go on. The enemies just keep pummeling you left and right. If you can sustain everything, you of course get a nice prize, do them all, get the big sword, yada yada yada. Other collectibles also include additional demon crests that you can find to give you small challenge rooms to beat up enemies with, and if you can find all of them in a stage, you'll get even more equipment to go with it. I've never finished any of them before making this video, but it did look like there was a lot more going on than I was able to find in time to make this, so I very much can't wait to get back to it. Another collectible I will mention for now, just because it goes into the core experience, is that there's an in-game shop that allows you to get more equipment, moves, extra health, extra kunai, etc. And the way you open the shop up gradually throughout the game comes around finding what are known as the Ouroboros clan emblems. You find these throughout the game in treasure chests. Some you'll find along the beaten path, others you'll find when you go back and revisit stages. And getting these over time, you can open up more and more of the shop's inventory, which, while it will get more expensive as the game goes on, with the amount of ways you're able to earn currency in-game, it doesn't feel like you have to grind to any extent, other than just playing the game naturally. Visually, I would say this is probably the prettiest Shinobi game that I have played personally. I feel a lot of people at the studio understood that the core gameplay was perfectly fine, and that was never going to be something people would necessarily call into question. However, I get a sense that they knew if they didn't make it just stand out enough, it probably wouldn't make as many headlines as they were expecting, so they went all in on the aesthetic, and oh my goodness, is this game pretty. From what I've played, each level has its own unique biome that makes it stand out from moment to moment, whereas the first level you're running through a bamboo forest out in the middle of the wilderness, another second you could be in this isolated mountainside with a bunch of wooden platforms and makeshift platforms to go with it, only to then, as you progress through the level, find yourself in a covert military base full of heavy machinery and robots in the background under construction, to then another level in which you'll be in this very populated city under a heavy rainstorm as you're swinging from rooftop to rooftop. There's such a nice cohesion to how all of it blends itself together, where every level feels truly unique, and you're never left sitting there scratching your head wondering why things feel repetitive or samey as you go along. For what the game does have in gameplay and visuals, I do wish I could say the same about the game's music, where, as serviceable as it is, there hasn't been any one track just yet as I'm playing through the game that I hear myself constantly humming afterwards I've finished playing. I'm sure it's there if I dig hard enough, but just listening to it in the background, there's nothing distinct that I'm just like, yeah, this is Shinobi. This is something I'm going to, hope one day we get a fun remix of in the future. It's all fine and dandy. It's hard to really complain. I do wish it just had that much more punch that could make it something a bit more memorable, but maybe I'm just not far enough in the game to really get that wow factor in. Aside from that, my only other real quote-unquote complaint that I can bring up at the moment is how the game does handle checkpoints a little bit. At first, the game does present you a nice checkpoint service that you can fast travel between areas to re-explore the map, and every time you do get to one initially, you do refill health and so forth. It works as you would expect. Though there are particular moments where you're about to go through a very platform-heavy segment, and the way the game handles you making a single mistake can feel just a little more punishing than it really should in certain moments, primarily with what I experienced in the mountainside machine factory level I briefly mentioned earlier, in which there'll be situations where you're running around and there are pillars crushing the ground in front of you and you have to kind of green light, red light your way through the entire thing. But every so often there'll be an enemy that'll, if you jump up the right way, will notice you. They're placed there clearly to make sure that you're not just trying to rush through it and you're being just a little more patient with it. But the way things can very easily time themselves to where you don't necessarily have a good moment to get up and strike so you can get through, if you get hit during any of this platforming segment, or other segments within the same level, mind you, and I don't mean getting hit by an enemy, I mean being hit by the environment, or failing your jumps, or something of that nature, rather than just be put somewhere close by that you can go through it again from that point onward, you start the very beginning of that environmental section, which, maybe that's just a me thing. I just find it a little tedious when I'm trying to make progress, and the smallest mistake, however far in, sends me all the way back to the beginning that I just kind of grown. This isn't a big problem with the game, as I've only ever really experienced it in this one particular level, so maybe I'm just a little too worked up about it. But aside from that, there's not much to complain about. To bring things back to a more positive note, I will say this game's story is so much more impactful and so well paced for what I was expecting going in. I was typically used to ready for the platformer tried and true, oh, I'm the villain, you're the hero, go get 'em sort of mantra that platformers tend to get stuck with. However, this game opens up very strongly, giving you initial impressions of, okay, this is my hero, this is why I want to care about him, this is my bad guy, go get him. But it goes just a little bit farther than that, giving you some very small but thoughtful deviations once in a while that make you kind of stop and be like, huh, how about that? I won't go into any specifics for people wanting to play the game themselves, but just know there has been multiple moments so far where I've just taken a step back and went, this is cool. There's so much going on, and that much more that I've yet to scratch the surface of. I give Shinobi Art of Vengeance an 8.5 out of 10. I'm sure as soon as I finish this video, I'm gonna feel silly for giving it that rating, wishing I was giving it even higher, like a 9, but from what I've experienced, that feels like a confident spot for this game. As always, everybody, I'm 32X, and I'll see you next time.